The observation deck of the Terran Defense Station Sentinel hung like a metal flower at the edge of human space, its sensors constantly sweeping the void for threats that Command assured everyone would never come. Lieutenant Sarah Chen had been assigned to this posting for 6 months, and in that time, the most exciting thing she had witnessed was a particularly colorful nebula formation that the science team got enthusiastic about for approximately 45 minutes. That was about to change in a way that would make history books across 1,000 worlds. The first alarm was subtle, almost apologetic in its chirping. Sarah glanced at her console, expecting another false positive from the hyperspace detection grid. The Kepler array had been acting up lately, throwing phantom readings that disappeared the moment anyone looked at them seriously. She reached to dismiss the notification when the second alarm joined it, then a third. Then suddenly her entire board lit up like a holiday display gone mad. "Commander Torres, you might want to see this," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the ice forming in her stomach. She had trained for this moment in simulations, had practiced the calm professionalism expected of Defense Fleet personnel, but nothing quite prepared you for the real thing. Commander Miguel Torres moved from his position near the tactical display, his coffee mug still in hand. He was a veteran of the border skirmishes, one of the few conflicts humanity had experienced since joining the galactic community 15 years ago. Those skirmishes had been brief, almost polite affairs where shots were rarely fired and treaties were signed before anyone got seriously hurt. The galaxy, it turned out, was fairly peaceful once you got past the reputation-mongering and territorial displays. "What have we got?" Torres asked, setting his mug down as he leaned over Sarah's shoulder. His casual demeanor evaporated the moment he saw the readings. The coffee mug tipped over, brown liquid spreading across the console deck, completely ignored. "Hyperspace ruptures," Sarah reported, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "Multiple contacts, very multiple contacts. Sir, the computer is having trouble counting them all." Torres straightened, his hand moving to the communications panel. "How many is very multiple, Lieutenant?" Sarah's mouth had gone dry. She swallowed, checked the numbers again, then checked them a third time because her brain simply refused to accept what her eyes were seeing. "Current count is over 3,000 vessels, Commander, and they're still coming through." The observation deck had gone silent, except for the various alarms and alerts that created a discordant symphony of warning. The 6 other personnel on duty had abandoned their stations and were now clustered around Sarah's console, watching the tactical display paint an increasingly dire picture. The ships emerging from hyperspace were arranged in a formation that human military analysts would later describe as a full war posture with overwhelming force doctrine. Every vessel type the galaxy possessed seemed represented in that armada. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons formed the core, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Surrounding them, carrier groups deployed fighter craft in swarms so dense they appeared as clouds on the sensors. Cruisers, destroyers, frigates, and vessels, whose classifications humanity had only read about in intelligence briefings, filled the space between the capital ships. It was the single largest military force ever assembled in recorded galactic history, and it was positioned directly at the edge of human territory. "Get me Fleet Command," Torres said quietly. "Priority Alpha. Tell them we have a situation." The communications officer, a young ensign whose name Sarah could never remember, worked his console with shaking hands. "Sir, I'm getting simultaneous hails from the Armada, all channels. They're broadcasting on every frequency." "Put it through," Torres ordered. The voice that filled the observation deck carried the weight of absolute authority, mixed with barely concealed contempt. It belonged to Supreme Admiral Krathnor of the Galactic Unity Council, a Vrexian whose species had been spacefaring for over 20,000 years. Humans had met Vrexians before, had shared meals and trade agreements with them, had considered them friends. The voice speaking now held none of that warmth. "Human station. This is Supreme Admiral Crathnor commanding the Unity Enforcement Fleet. You are hereby ordered to stand down all defensive systems and prepare to receive boarding parties. The human experiment in independence has concluded. The Galactic Unity Council has determined that your species poses an unacceptable risk to civilized space and must be placed under protective supervision for the benefit of all sapient beings. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Protective supervision was the polite term for what amounted to species-wide imprisonment. It had happened before to other races, though not in several thousand years. The process was always the same: overwhelming force, quick capitulation, then centuries of monitored development until the Unity Council deemed the species ready for limited autonomy. "This is Commander Torres of Terran Defense Station Sentinel," Miguel responded, his voice carrying none of the fear that Sarah could see in the tension of his shoulders. "Supreme Admiral, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Humanity has honored every treaty, paid every tariff, and followed every regulation placed upon us. We've done nothing to warrant this kind of response." Crathnor's laugh was a harsh, grinding sound. "You exist, Commander. That is warrant enough. Your species demonstrated faster-than-light travel after only 200 years of industrial development. You solved quantum field manipulation in less than a decade. You create artificial intelligence as if it were a trivial exercise in programming. Do you understand what this means? Every other species in the galaxy took tens of thousands of years to achieve what you have accomplished in mere centuries." The Admiral paused, and Sarah could hear the rustling of scales that indicated deep Vrexian agitation. "We have studied your history, humans. We have seen your wars, your weapons, your seemingly endless capacity for violence and innovation. The Council has concluded that allowing your species to continue unchecked represents an existential threat to galactic stability. You will submit to supervision, or you will be reduced to pre-industrial status. These are your only options." Commander Torres stood silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the massive armada hanging in space like a sword over humanity's throat. Sarah watched her commander's face cycle through several emotions: shock, anger, despair, and finally something she couldn't quite identify. It looked almost like amusement. "Supreme Admiral," Torres said slowly, "I need to forward your terms to Fleet Command. This is obviously beyond my authority to accept or reject. While we're waiting for their response, would you mind if I asked a question? Speak quickly, Commander. My patience for human delays is limited." "How long did it take you to assemble this fleet?" Torres asked, gesturing at the tactical display. 3,000 ships, all combat-ready, all crewed and supplied for what I assume is an extended occupation operation. That's an incredible logistical achievement. Months of planning, I'd imagine. Maybe years." Crathnor's tone carried satisfaction. 4 years, Commander. 4 years of careful preparation and assembly. Every member species of the Unity Council contributed vessels. This armada represents the combined military might of 47 civilizations. It is unstoppable, invincible, and absolutely committed to bringing humanity to heel. 4 years, Torres repeated, nodding slowly. That strange expression on his face grew stronger. "And in those 4 years, did it occur to anyone in your intelligence divisions to actually visit human space, to observe what we've been doing, to update your threat assessments beyond whatever files you pulled from our admission to the galactic community?" "We know everything we need to know about humanity," the Admiral replied coldly. "Your submission is inevitable. Delay only increases the likelihood of regrettable casualties." Commander Torres reached for his communications panel, opening a secure channel. "Commander Torres to Fleet Admiral Hayes, priority flash traffic. Authentication code Torres Sigma 77. Ma'am, we have approximately 3,000 Unity Council vessels at the border demanding our immediate surrender. Situation is as predicted. Request permission to implement response protocol Lazarus." Sarah's head snapped toward her commander. She knew that designation. Every member of the defense fleet knew it, though most considered it an exercise in paranoid preparation that would never actually be used. Response Protocol Lazarus had been drafted within the first year of humanity's contact with galactic civilization, created by strategists who looked at human history and made some uncomfortable predictions about how older civilizations might react to humanity's rapid advancement. Fleet Admiral Hayes's response came through after only a 15-second delay. Her voice was crisp, professional, and carried an undertone that Sarah recognized from her grandmother, who had fought in the last Earth War. It was the tone of someone who had made peace with necessary violence. Permission granted, Commander. Execute Protocol Lazarus. Time to remind the galaxy why apex predators smile before they strike. Torres nodded, even though the Admiral couldn't see him, then switched back to the open channel with the Unity fleet. Supreme Admiral Crathnor, I have received Fleet Command's response to your ultimatum. Finally, Crathnor said, I trust humanity will be sensible. Oh, absolutely, Torres agreed. And now Sarah could clearly identify the expression on his face. It was the look of someone about to tell a joke that only they understood, but would become hilariously clear very shortly. We're going to be extremely sensible. But first, I need to address something you said earlier. You mentioned that the Unity Council spent 4 years assembling this impressive armada. That's a long time, Admiral. A lot can change in 4 years. Nothing has changed, Commander. You possess 15 defensive stations, perhaps 300 system defense vessels, and your planetary shields, while impressive for such a young species, are inadequate against weapons of this magnitude. You cannot win. You can only choose how many of your people die before you accept the inevitable. Torres smiled then, and it was not a pleasant expression. See, that's where you made your mistake, Admiral. You're working with old intelligence, very old intelligence. You looked at where humanity was when we joined the galactic community and assumed we stayed there. You thought we were still a newly spacefaring species taking baby steps into a big, complicated galaxy. The commander pulled up a different display, one that showed the inner reaches of the solar system. Let me update your threat assessment, Admiral. You're correct that we have 15 defensive stations. What you don't know is that each station is now equipped with quantum displacement weapons that can target vessels in hyperspace. We developed that technology 3 years ago, about 6 months after we noticed Unity Council reconnaissance drones getting a bit too curious about our military installations. Crathnor's voice carried the first hint of uncertainty. Impossible. Quantum displacement weaponry is theoretical. No species has successfully overcome the targeting paradoxes. No species had successfully overcome the paradoxes, Torres corrected gently. We figured it out. Turns out it's not actually that complicated once you stop thinking about quantum states as fixed positions and start treating them as probability clouds you can manipulate. We had some very clever graduate students working on it, published their dissertation and everything. Lovely piece of work, really. I don't understand most of it, but the weapons techs assure me it functions beautifully. Sarah watched the tactical display, where human vessels were beginning to appear from what seemed like nowhere. They materialized on the plot without the characteristic energy signatures of hyperspace emergence. One moment, space was empty. The next, it contained a warship. You mentioned our 300 system defense vessels, Torres continued, his voice taking on a lecturing quality. Again, old numbers. We've been rather busy, Admiral. Automated construction facilities are wonderful things. We've embraced them with characteristic human enthusiasm. Current count of active military vessels is somewhere around 8,000, though honestly, production has ramped up so significantly in the past year that the Quartermaster Corps has trouble keeping accurate records. The tactical display now showed human vessels surrounding the Unity fleet in a spherical formation that Sarah recognized from her tactical training. It was called a kill box, and it was designed for exactly one purpose. 8,000? Krathnor's voice had lost its confident superiority. That's impossible. Our intelligence clearly showed your industrial capacity could not support such a fleet. Your intelligence was 18 months out of date, Torres said, and now there was steel in his voice. Humans have this unfortunate habit of exponential growth once we commit to something. We also have this wonderful evolutionary trait called paranoia, probably developed from spending a few million years as persistence hunters who had to constantly worry about being eaten by things with bigger teeth. When we entered the galactic community and saw how some older civilizations looked at us, that paranoia kicked in beautifully. Commander Torres pulled up another display, this one showing construct yards throughout the solar system. Massive structures orbited every major body, each one churning out vessels, weapons, and defensive systems at a pace that made Sarah's head spin just looking at the production figures. We did some calculations, Admiral, Torres continued. We looked at galactic history and noticed a pattern. Young species like us tend to have two paths, peaceful integration or forced subjugation. We hoped for the first, but we prepared for the second. Did you know that Earth's economy has been on a war footing for the past 3 years? We didn't advertise it, didn't make a fuss, just quietly redirected approximately 30% of our gross planetary product toward military preparation. 30%? Even across light years and through communication systems, Krathnor's shock was evident. That's economically unsustainable, Torres laughed, and it was genuine amusement. Admiral, humans have historically put 50 to 60% of our economy toward war efforts when we felt threatened. 30% is us being conservative. We have entire asteroid belts converted into autonomous weapons platforms. We have ships equipped with weapon systems that violate approximately 17 different Unity Council conventions on acceptable force in civilized space. We have things in development that keep our own ethicists awake at night. Sarah pulled up additional sensor data, and what she saw made her breath catch. The Unity fleet was now completely surrounded by human vessels, outnumbered nearly 3 to 1. But more impressive than the numbers was the positioning. Every human ship was in perfect firing position, their targeting systems locked, their weapons charged. "Here's what's going to happen, Supreme Admiral," Torres said, his voice dropping into command mode. "You're going to order your fleet to stand down and withdraw from human space. You're going to return to the Unity Council and inform them that humanity declines their generous offer of protective supervision. You're going to recommend that all future interactions with humanity be conducted with the understanding that we are not prey, we are not children, and we are absolutely not going to submit to anyone's control ever again." "And if I refuse?" Krathnor asked, but the confidence was gone from his voice, replaced by the realization that his overwhelming force had become surrounded and outgunned by a species he had dismissed as primitive. "Then we demonstrate why persistence hunters are called apex predators, Admiral," Torres replied softly. "We're not the biggest, not the strongest, not even the most advanced species in the galaxy. But we are the most stubborn, the most adaptable, and the most willing to do whatever is necessary for survival. You brought 3,000 ships to intimidate us. We built 8,000 to ensure you couldn't. You spent 4 years planning. We spent 4 years preparing. The difference matters." The observation deck was silent, except for the hum of electronics and the distant thrum of the station's power systems. Sarah watched the tactical display, seeing the Unity fleet beginning to shift, their vessels moving into defensive formations that were already too late to matter. "Your move, Admiral," Torres said. "But I should mention that every human vessel currently surrounding your fleet is equipped with faster-than-light communication. If this goes badly, every Unity Council world will know within minutes that you led your armada into a trap. History will remember you as either the admiral who wisely withdrew from an unwinnable confrontation, or the one who started a war that would cost civilized space more casualties than the last 10,000 years combined." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Commander Torres had always been good at negotiations. Supreme Admiral Crathnor stared at the tactical display aboard his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched his perfect plan disintegrate like morning frost under a harsh sun. The holographic representation showed his carefully assembled armada, the product of 4 years of diplomatic maneuvering and military coordination, now encircled by an impossibly large human fleet that had appeared seemingly from nowhere. His tactical officer, a young Vrexian named Salt, spoke with a trembling voice. "Admiral, our sensors are detecting weapon signatures consistent with Mark 7 plasma lances, quantum disruptors, and something our database cannot identify. Whatever those unknown systems are, they are drawing enormous power. Enemy vessels maintain target lock on all our ships." Crathnor's scales rippled with agitation, a biological response he could not fully control. How did this happen? Our intelligence was certain of human capabilities. 300 vessels maximum, primitive defensive systems, limited production capacity. He slammed his clawed hand against the command console, leaving small dents in the metal. Where did 8,000 warships come from? Admiral. His intelligence officer spoke up hesitantly. I may have an explanation. I have been reviewing our surveillance records. It appears that 3 years ago, human shipping patterns changed dramatically. They began using encrypted transponders and irregular routes. We dismissed this as typical commercial security measures. And, Crathnor demanded, and it appears we missed the significance. Humans were not simply protecting commercial interests. They were obscuring military construction and deployment. Every irregular shipping route, every encrypted manifest, every unusual trade agreement was concealing military buildup. They hid an entire arms race in plain sight by making it look like ordinary commerce. Crathnor felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it as fear. In his 300 years of military service, he had fought in border disputes, quelled pirate operations, and commanded peacekeeping forces across dozens of systems. Never once had he felt genuinely afraid. The Unity Council's military superiority had always been absolute, unquestionable, until now. The human commander offers us withdrawal, Crathnor said slowly, his mind racing through tactical scenarios. Every simulation his implants ran showed the same result. Catastrophic casualties if fighting began. The humans had positioned their fleet with precision that suggested either brilliant tactical planning or very advanced artificial intelligence coordinating their movements. Probably both. Admiral, we must consider our honor, his second officer said stiffly. The Unity Council expects results. We cannot simply withdraw because the humans show their teeth. Crathnor turned to face his second officer, a career military officer whose family had served the Vrexian Empire for generations. Honor does not interest me when facing annihilation, Commander. Wars are won by those who survive to claim victory, not by those who die in glorious futility. Before Crathnor could issue orders, a new voice crackled over the communication system. This one was different from Commander Torres, deeper and carrying an accent that the translation matrix struggled to render properly. Attention Unity Fleet, this is Fleet Admiral Christina Hayes of the Terran Defense Force. I'm transmitting from TDF Indomitable, currently positioned approximately 6,000 kilometers off your flagship's port side. Before you bother looking for us, I should mention that we're running full stealth systems, so your sensors probably can't detect us. But trust me, we're here, and we're very capable of ruining your entire day. Crathnor's sensor officer worked frantically at his console, then looked up with wide eyes. Admiral, I'm picking up a faint distortion at the indicated coordinates. It's consistent with advanced stealth technology, but beyond anything in our database. If there's actually a vessel there, it's effectively invisible to our systems. Admiral Hayes continued speaking, her tone conversational, but carrying an undercurrent that reminded Crathnor of the apex predators on his homeworld, right before they struck. Supreme Admiral Crathnor, I've been listening to your conversation with Commander Torres. He's a good officer, very diplomatic, very reasonable. I, however, am significantly less diplomatic, and my patience for threats against my species expired about the time your fleet emerged from hyperspace in an aggressive formation. You cannot threaten the United Galactic Council, Crathnor responded, forcing authority into his voice. We represent 47 civilizations. You are one species, barely 15 years into galactic society. That's where you're wrong, Admiral, Hayes replied, and Crathnor heard something in her voice that made his scales tighten against his body in instinctive defense. You represent 47 civilizations who thought they could bully humanity into submission because we're young and relatively inexperienced in galactic politics. What you failed to account for is that humans have been bullying each other for our entire history. We are experts at violence, at strategy, at finding ways to defeat opponents who should logically be superior. Crathnor watched his tactical display update as more human vessels appeared from stealth, their positions forming an increasingly sophisticated web around his fleet. The formation was beautiful in its lethal efficiency, every ship positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire, while minimizing their own exposure to counterattack. Let me tell you a story, Admiral, Hayes continued. About 3 years ago, shortly after humanity joined the galactic community, I attended a Unity Council military symposium on established defensive doctrines. Fascinating event, very educational. I learned how galactic civilizations think about warfare, about acceptable losses, about proportional response. I also noticed something interesting. Every single doctrine assumed technological parity or superiority. Crathnor remained silent, listening despite himself. Do you know what humans call the kind of warfare we developed on Earth? Hayes asked. Asymmetric warfare. We became masters of defeating opponents who had every advantage. Better weapons, more resources, superior positions. We learned to win anyway, through creativity, through unorthodox tactics, through sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. We brought that expertise to space. The Admiral paused, and Crathnor heard keyboard clicks in the background. Your fleet composition is impressive, Admiral. 15 dreadnoughts, 62 carriers, 340 cruisers, and approximately 2,000 support vessels. Combined crew complement of roughly 4 million sapient beings. That's a lot of people whose families expect them to come home. Is this where you threaten mass casualties? Crathnor asked bitterly. Where you demonstrate human barbarity? No, Hayes replied, and her voice suddenly carried sadness that surprised Crathnor. This is where I demonstrate human restraint. Admiral, we don't want to fight you. Every human vessel in this system is crewed by people who understand the cost of war. We've lived through enough conflicts on our own world to know that victory and justice rarely align, and that even justified violence leaves scars that never fully heal. Then why this display? Crathnor demanded. Why build this fleet? Why surround us? Because bullies respect strength, Hayes said simply. And because we needed you to understand that threatening humanity is not a cost-free proposition. You came here expecting to intimidate primitives. Instead, you found peers who are prepared to defend themselves. That changes the equation considerably. Crathnor's communication officer gestured urgently. Admiral, I'm receiving coded transmissions from multiple Unity Council homeworlds. They're demanding status updates. Several ambassadors are requesting immediate explanation for the fleet deployment. It seems word has spread quickly, Hayes observed, clearly monitoring the same communications. That's the problem with assembling a fleet this size, Admiral. Everyone notices. Everyone has opinions. Everyone has political considerations. The Unity Council authorized this operation in secret, didn't they? Classified it as a peacekeeping mission. But now it's very public and very complicated. Crathnor closed his eyes, understanding the political trap that had snapped shut around him. If he withdrew, he would be seen as weak, incompetent, unable to complete his mission. If he attacked, he would initiate a war that could destabilize the entire galactic community, and from what he was seeing, a war that the Unity fleet would likely lose. Both options were politically catastrophic. "You're offering me a third option," Crathnor said slowly. "I can hear it in your voice." "I'm offering you the truth," Hayes replied. "The truth is that your intelligence was flawed. The truth is that humanity is not a threat to galactic stability, but we are absolutely a threat to anyone who tries to subjugate us. The truth is that the Unity Council made a mistake based on fear and incomplete information." Hayes paused, letting her words sink in. "Here's what I propose, Admiral. You withdraw your fleet. We withdraw ours. You report to the Unity Council that humanity's military capacity was substantially underestimated, and that further aggressive action would be strategically inadvisable. We simultaneously release a diplomatic statement expressing our continued desire for peaceful cooperation with all galactic civilizations." "And the 8,000 warships?" Crathnor asked. "You simply hide them again? Pretend they don't exist?" "We maintain them," Hayes said firmly. "We continue developing our defensive capabilities. We make it abundantly clear that while we seek peace, we are prepared for war. The galaxy adjusts its assessment of humanity, and everyone moves forward with a more accurate understanding of the situation." Crathnor considered his options. His tactical implants ran probability assessments, political calculations, long-term strategic analyses. Every scenario that involved attacking the humans resulted in catastrophic outcomes. Even if the Unity fleet somehow achieved tactical victory, the cost would be devastating. Thousands of ships destroyed, millions of casualties, and for what? To subjugate a species that had proven itself capable of matching the combined military might of 47 civilizations? "You will allow us to withdraw unmolested?" Crathnor asked. "Completely unmolested," Hayes confirmed. "Not a single shot fired. You turn your fleet around, you jump to hyperspace, and you go home to your families. We do the same. Tomorrow, diplomats on both sides work on repairing relationships and establishing new treaties based on mutual respect rather than intimidation." "The Unity Council will not accept this failure easily." "The Unity Council will accept what you tell them," Hayes countered. "You're a 300-year-old admiral with a distinguished service record. Your reputation carries weight. Tell them that humanity is not the threat they feared, but rather a potential ally with unexpected capabilities. Tell them that peaceful coexistence benefits everyone more than war. Tell them the truth." Crathnor looked at his assembled officers, seeing the tension in their postures, the fear in their eyes. They were good officers, loyal and competent. They deserved to go home. The 4 million crew members under his command deserved to go home. "Admiral Hayes," Crathnor said formally, "the Unity Enforcement Fleet accepts your proposal. We will withdraw from human space and report our findings to the Council. I trust that humanity will honor its commitment to peaceful relations." "You have my word, Admiral," Hayes replied. "And despite what you may have heard about human duplicity, we take our promises seriously, especially promises made to prevent bloodshed." Crathnor began issuing orders, and slowly, ponderously, the massive Unity Armada began to reorient. Thousands of ships moved in coordinated formation, their weapons powering down, their hyperspace drives beginning the charge sequence that would carry them away from this confrontation. As his flagship prepared to jump, Crathnor opened a private channel to Admiral Hayes. "A personal question, if you will permit it." "Of course." "Did you truly have 8,000 vessels ready to engage? Or was this an elaborate bluff?" Hayes laughed, and it was warm and genuine. "Admiral, would you believe me if I told you either way? The thing about bluffs is that they only work if your opponent can't afford to call them. You couldn't afford to find out if I was bluffing. That's what made it effective." "A non-answer that is itself an answer," Crathnor observed. "Very human. We're a complicated species," Hayes agreed. But I'll tell you this much. Every vessel you saw on your sensors was real and combat capable. Whether that represents our full strength or merely what we chose to show you, well, that's something the Unity Council can contemplate during future treaty negotiations. The hyperspace drives of the Unity fleet reached full charge. Krathnor gave the order, and 3,000 ships vanished from human space in a cascade of dimensional tiers, leaving behind only fading energy signatures and a fundamentally altered galactic political landscape. Aboard Terran Defense Station Sentinel, Lieutenant Sarah Chen watched the tactical display clear as the Unity fleet departed. Commander Torres stood beside her, his face showing relief mixed with exhaustion. "Did we really have 8,000 ships?" Sarah asked quietly. Torres smiled. "We had enough. That's all that matters. Though between you and me, production actually hit 9,000 last week. We didn't mention that because it seemed like overkill." Sarah laughed despite herself, the tension of the past hour finally breaking. Around the observation deck, other personnel were celebrating quietly, professional enough to maintain decorum but unable to completely hide their joy at surviving what could have been a civilization-ending conflict. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now," Torres said, picking up his coffee mug and discovering the spilled contents had created a sticky mess on the deck. "Now we clean up, file about 6,000 reports, and wait to see how the galactic community responds. But I suspect things are going to be different from here on out." He was right, of course. Things would never be the same. The Galactic Unity Council chamber had stood for 12,000 years, a monument to cooperation among civilized species. Its walls were constructed from crystallized starlight harvested from the core of an ancient supernova, and its ceiling displayed a real-time map of all member civilizations scattered across the galaxy. Today, that chamber buzzed with an energy that its architects had never intended, barely controlled panic. Ambassador Rebecca Adeyemi stood at the human delegation's platform, watching chaos unfold with the careful neutrality of a seasoned diplomat. Around her, representatives from 47 civilizations argued, shouted, and, in some cases, made threatening gestures at each other. The Unity Council had not experienced this level of discord in over 3 millennia, and it showed. "This is an outrage!" roared Ambassador Thexnor, a Vrexian whose scales were flushed deep purple with rage. He was Supreme Admiral Krathnor's cousin, and he took the fleet's withdrawal as a personal insult. The humans made threats, displayed military force beyond all acceptable protocols, and violated every principle of peaceful coexistence. They must be sanctioned, their fleet dismantled, their production facilities placed under Unity supervision. Ambassador Adeyemi allowed the tirade to continue for several moments before activating her platform's speaker system. Her voice, amplified by technology that could be heard across the vast chamber, cut through the noise with practiced authority. "Ambassador Thexnor raises interesting points," Rebecca said, her tone pleasant and conversational. "I'm particularly fascinated by his assertion that displaying military force violates principles of peaceful coexistence. This from the representative of a civilization that sent 3,000 warships to demand humanity's surrender. The irony is so rich I could serve it at a state dinner." Scattered laughter rippled through the chamber, primarily from delegations that had not participated in the Unity fleet operation. Rebecca noted their positions carefully, future allies perhaps, or at least species who recognized absurdity when they saw it. Thexnor's scales darkened further. "We acted to protect galactic stability. Your species' rapid advancement represents a clear threat." "A threat based on what evidence?" Rebecca asked, her voice sharpening. "Humanity has committed no acts of aggression. We have honored every treaty, paid every agreed-upon tariff, and participated in good faith in every diplomatic exchange. Our crime, apparently, is developing too quickly by your standards. Please explain to this council what exactly we were supposed to do." Deliberately hamper our own scientific progress? Pretend to be less capable than we are? Accept subjugation because you find our growth rate unsettling? She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled ambassadors. Some met her gaze, others looked away uncomfortably. They all knew she was right, but admitting it meant acknowledging that the Unity Council had acted out of fear rather than justice. "Let me tell you what actually happened," Rebecca continued. 3 years ago, human intelligence agencies detected increased surveillance of our space. Unity Council reconnaissance drones, civilian vessels carrying unusual sensor packages, mysterious inquiries about our industrial capacity from dozens of sources. We're not stupid, honored ambassadors. We recognized the pattern. She pulled up holographic displays showing the surveillance timeline, the data collection efforts, the diplomatic inquiries that seemed innocent but probed for military weaknesses. The evidence was comprehensive and damning. "We knew something was coming," Rebecca said. "We didn't know what, but we knew it wouldn't be friendly. So we did what humans have always done when facing an existential threat. We prepared. We built defenses. We created deterrence. We made sure that anyone considering aggression against humanity would understand the cost." Ambassador Vrix of the Centauri Collective, one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, activated her platform. Her species communicated through bioluminescent patterns that translation systems rendered as speech, and her tone carried sadness. "Ambassador Adeyemi, while I understand your position, surely you must acknowledge that humanity's military buildup was excessive. 8,000 warships. That is not defense. That is preparation for conquest." Rebecca turned to face the Centauri ambassador, a species humanity had genuinely admired for their wisdom and peaceful nature. "Ambassador Vrix, with respect, you're looking at the situation backward. We didn't build 8,000 ships to conquer anyone. We built them because 3,000 ships showed up at our doorstep demanding surrender. We built exactly enough force to ensure that surrender would never be our only option." She manipulated the holographic display, showing comparative military strengths. "Look at these numbers. The Unity Council fleet represented the combined might of 47 civilizations. Even with our expanded fleet, humanity controls less military power than any 5 council members combined. We're not preparing for conquest, we're preparing to survive." Ambassador Zefkar of the Aquarian Assembly spoke, his water-filled containment suit bubbling with agitation. "The question before this council is simple. Do we allow one species to maintain military parity with the combined council forces? Do we set a precedent that any civilization can arm itself to this degree without oversight?" "The question before this council," Rebecca countered firmly, "is whether we continue to pretend that the Unity Council represents justice and cooperation, or whether we finally admit it has become a tool for maintaining the power of established civilizations at the expense of newer members. Because let me be very clear, humanity will not disarm. We will not accept supervision. We will not submit to any authority that believes youth is a crime worthy of subjugation." The chamber erupted again, but Rebecca noticed something important. Several ambassadors who had been hostile earlier were now silent, watching her with calculating expressions. They were doing the political math, recognizing that the situation had fundamentally changed. She pressed her advantage. "I want to share something with this council. In human history, we have a concept called mutually assured destruction. It's not pleasant, but it's effective. 2 powers build weapons capable of destroying each other, and paradoxically, this prevents war because neither side can win. The cost is always too high." Rebecca pulled up new displays, showing humanity's defense network, production capacity, and technological development trajectory. She made sure every ambassador could see the numbers, could understand the implications. "Here's the truth, honored ambassadors. Humanity can hurt you. We cannot conquer the galaxy. We cannot defeat all 47 council civilizations, but we can absolutely inflict unacceptable casualties on anyone who attacks us. This is not a threat. This is a statement of fact, and it represents the foundation for future peace." Ambassador Thexnor tried to interrupt, but Rebecca continued over him, her voice rising. "The Unity Council made a choice based on fear. You saw a young species developing rapidly, and instead of embracing us as potential partners, you decided we needed to be controlled. You assembled an armada in secret. You planned to reduce humanity to a protectorate without even the courtesy of diplomatic warning. And you're angry that we defended ourselves?" She let silence fall across the chamber before speaking again, her tone softer but no less firm. "I'm not here to make threats or demands. I'm here to offer a choice. Humanity can be your enemy, constantly growing stronger, constantly preparing for the next confrontation. Or we can be your partner, bringing our innovation and energy to the galactic community as equals. But we will never, ever be your subjects." Ambassador Vrix's bioluminescence patterns shifted to contemplative colors. "You speak of partnership, but you demonstrate weapons and flex military strength. How can we trust that humanity seeks peace?" Rebecca smiled, and it was genuine. "Ambassador, humans have been asking ourselves that same question for our entire history. How do we trust each other when we're all capable of violence? We found an answer, though it took us thousands of years and countless mistakes. You trust through verification, through mutual benefit, through shared interests, and through the understanding that cooperation serves everyone better than conflict." She pulled up another display, this one showing human scientific research, agricultural developments, medical breakthroughs, and engineering innovations. "While we were building our defense fleet, we were also doing this: cures for 17 previously incurable diseases, agricultural techniques that increase yields by 40%, power generation systems that are 90% more efficient than previous models, transportation technology that cuts interstellar travel time by half. We want to share all of this with the galactic community." The chamber had gone quiet, ambassadors leaning forward to study the displayed information. Rebecca could see interest replacing hostility on many faces. This was the moment where diplomacy either succeeded or failed. "Here's what I propose," Rebecca said. "Humanity maintains its defensive capabilities, but we place them under a treaty framework that includes verification protocols. Unity Council observers can monitor our military production to ensure we're not preparing for aggression. In exchange, we gain full status as an independent member civilization with all associated rights and protections. We also establish technology-sharing agreements that benefit everyone." Ambassador Vrix considered this, her bioluminescence flickering with thought patterns. "And if the Council refuses? If we cannot accept a heavily armed human civilization?" "Then we continue as we are," Rebecca said with a shrug. "Humanity remains independent, maintains its defenses, and we have a very awkward relationship where everyone is constantly worried about everyone else. Not ideal, but acceptable. Or the Council can try again to force submission, and we demonstrate exactly why that's a terrible idea. Those are the options." "You would go to war with the entire galaxy?" Ambassador Thexnor asked incredulously. "We would defend ourselves," Rebecca corrected. "There's a difference. We don't want war, Ambassador. We've seen enough of war on our own world to know its cost. But we remember our history. We remember what happens to civilizations that surrender their ability to defend themselves. They become subjects, then slaves, then footnotes in history. Humanity will not become a footnote." For several long minutes, the chamber descended into smaller group discussions as ambassadors consulted with their governments through secure channels. Rebecca stood calmly at her platform, appearing relaxed despite her racing heart. Everything depended on the next few minutes. Finally, Ambassador Vrix spoke, her bioluminescence indicating formal decision-making mode. "The Centauri Collective proposes a motion. humanity shall be recognized as a full independent member civilization with enhanced status reflecting their technological and military capacity. A treaty framework shall be established including mutual verification protocols, technology sharing agreements, and formal security guarantees. This motion requires a two-thirds majority to pass. Rebecca held her breath as the voting began. Holographic tallies appeared above each delegation's platform, showing their position. Green for support, red for opposition, yellow for abstention. The colors flickered across the chamber like confused fireflies. The first votes were predictable. Civilizations that had contributed heavily to the Unity fleet voted red. Smaller civilizations that had watched the confrontation nervously voted green. But then something unexpected happened. Larger civilizations began voting green as well, recognizing the political and economic benefits of partnership with humanity. The tally climbed: 60%, 65%, 68%, and finally settled at 71% in favor. The motion passed. Ambassador Vrix's bioluminescence shifted to satisfied blue. The Unity Council has spoken. Humanity is hereby recognized with full independent status and all associated rights. May this mark the beginning of a productive partnership rather than the continuation of a dangerous standoff. Rebecca felt tension drain from her body, replaced by cautious relief. They had done it. Humanity had faced down the largest military force in galactic history and emerged not just surviving, but thriving. Later, in the quiet of the human embassy, Rebecca met with her staff to review the day's events. Her deputy ambassador, Marcus Chen, brought her a cup of coffee that she accepted gratefully. "We did it," Marcus said, shaking his head in disbelief. "We actually pulled it off." "We had help," Rebecca replied. "Admiral Hayes and the Defense Fleet scared them badly enough that they were willing to negotiate. Fear is an effective motivator, though not a foundation for lasting peace." "So what now?" asked Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the embassy's chief scientific advisor. "We have treaties, recognition, and a very nervous galactic community watching our every move." Rebecca smiled. "Now we prove that we're the partners we claim to be. We share technology. We participate in joint scientific ventures. We demonstrate that human strength is meant for defense, not aggression. We build trust slowly, carefully, and we never forget why we had to build that fleet in the first place." She looked out the embassy window at the vista of the council world, where hundreds of civilizations mingled in the closest thing to galactic unity that anyone had achieved. It was beautiful and fragile and worth protecting. "The galaxy thought we were children playing at being adults," Rebecca continued quietly. "They thought rapid development meant we were dangerous, unstable, likely to self-destruct or lash out violently. They forgot that sometimes species develop quickly because they're actually good at learning, at adapting, at overcoming challenges." Marcus nodded. "The HFY crowd back home is going to love this story. Humanity stands up to the Galactic Empire and wins through superior preparation and strategy." "It's not quite that simple," Rebecca cautioned. "We didn't win. We avoided losing, which is very different. The Unity Council could have pushed the issue, could have accepted the casualties and worn us down through sheer attrition. They chose not to because the cost was too high and the benefit too uncertain. That's not the same as victory." "Feels like victory," Sarah observed. Rebecca laughed. "I suppose it does. And maybe that's enough. Maybe survival and recognition is all the victory we needed. The rest we can build slowly, through cooperation and shared purpose." Back on Earth, Lieutenant Sarah Chen was giving her report to a committee of defense analysts who hung on every word. She described the Unity fleet's arrival, the surrounding of their forces by human vessels, and the eventual withdrawal. The analysts scribbled notes, asked technical questions, and generally seemed satisfied that their planning had been validated. When the formal debriefing ended, Admiral Hayes herself appeared via holographic projection to speak with Sarah privately. You did well out there, Lieutenant, Hayes said. Keeping calm under pressure is harder than it looks in training simulations. Thank you, Admiral. Though I have to admit, I was terrified the entire time. Hayes smiled. Good. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you from getting overconfident. The day you stop being afraid in situations like that is the day you start making fatal mistakes. Can I ask you something, Admiral? Sarah ventured. Of course. Did we really have 9,000 ships? Or was Commander Torres exaggerating for my benefit? Admiral Hayes's smile widened. Lieutenant, we have exactly as many ships as we need to ensure no one ever puts humanity in that position again. The exact number is classified, subject to change, and frankly less important than the perception. As long as the galaxy believes we can defend ourselves effectively, the actual numbers become somewhat academic. So you're not going to tell me? I'm going to tell you that you did excellent work, that your career prospects are very bright, and that sometimes the best answer to a question is recognizing that the question itself might be missing the point. Hayes paused, her expression becoming more serious. The Unity Council learned an important lesson today. They learned that humanity cannot be intimidated, cannot be controlled, and cannot be dismissed as primitive just because we're young. That lesson is worth more than any number of warships. Sarah nodded slowly, understanding. What happens if they try again? If they decide that humanity is still too dangerous to leave alone? Then we demonstrate that our first display was us being polite, Hayes said flatly. But I don't think they will. The Unity Council is composed of old civilizations that have survived by being pragmatic. They made a mistake. They paid a political price for it, and they'll adjust their strategy. Future interactions will be based on mutual respect rather than attempted subjugation. That's progress. The holographic projection flickered slightly as Hayes prepared to disconnect. One last thing, Lieutenant. Your commander speaks highly of you. How would you feel about a transfer to the Diplomatic Security Division? We need people who can stay calm under pressure and understand both military and political considerations. Sarah felt her heart race. Diplomatic security was one of the most prestigious assignments in the defense fleet, handling protection of ambassadors, security at treaty negotiations, and coordination between military and civilian leadership. I would be honored, Admiral. Good. Expect orders within the week. Congratulations, Lieutenant. You're going to help build the peace that our fleet made possible. Months later, the incident that would become known as the Unity Crisis or the Great Standoff was already fading into diplomatic history, replaced by the mundane work of treaty implementation, technology exchanges, and the gradual building of trust between humanity and the galactic community. But in military academies across human space, in defense fleet training centers and strategic planning facilities, the lessons of that day were studied intensely. The analysts dissected every decision, every tactical choice, every diplomatic phrase. They turned it into doctrine, into training scenarios, into the foundation of humanity's approach to galactic security. The message was clear. Humanity would seek peace, would offer partnership, would contribute to galactic civilization with enthusiasm and goodwill. But humanity would never again be vulnerable to threats from those who mistook youth for weakness or diplomacy for cowardice. The galaxy had shown up in full strength, expecting to find prey. They found peers instead, armed and ready, dangerous and determined. It was a miscalculation that changed everything, creating a new balance of power that would shape galactic politics for generations to come. And through it all, humanity maintained its peculiar sense of humor, its ability to find amusement in even the most serious situations. Because when the greatest military force ever assembled arrived to demand surrender, humanity simply chuckled, showed its teeth, and politely declined. That chuckle echoed across the galaxy, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous opponents are the ones who refuse to be intimidated, who smile in the face of threats, and who understand that survival often depends not on being the strongest, but on being too costly to challenge. Humanity had learned that lesson well, and they had no intention of forgetting it.